Mm-hmm.
Greetings and welcome to Wake the Dead. I am honored to have my first guest on our program, Mark Devlin. He needs no introduction. He's risen to the ranks, a respected individual, and we are very honored to have him here as our first guest. Welcome.
Well, thanks, Sean. No introduction is my favorite kind of introduction.
Your work speaks for itself. So we're glad to have you here. Today we decided to discuss Rosemary's Baby and the occult, esoteric elements involved in this film. It's a little break from my Kubrick depths dives, and this is a little break from Mark, your freedom-oriented rallies and helping fight the freedom fight out there in the world. How was it last
from the COVID
weekend?
Bollocks, most importantly.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that we can talk about something that lets our mind relax.
Yeah, thank you. Something else to talk about in life. Imagine that.
Yeah, right. God bless it. And art is always a good thing to talk about because there's so many places for our mind to go.
That's right. And this is such a fascinating movie that we've selected to talk about today.
Yes.
You could do a whole series on this.
Yes.
In reality.
Yeah.
But it is a fascinating one to take a deep dive into because it spreads into so many other areas of research that you and I have both done.
Right.
It encompasses so many different other aspects of conspiracy and truth and alternative research. And it is one of the most, incredible movies to get into and analyze in that way.
That's right.
And it took you away from Kubrick. So, hey, there's a thing.
Right. Something different. It's sadly, it's directed by evil pedophile, but at least
it'll be the first, wouldn't
it? Yeah, right. We're looking at Hollywood. So what are we going to do?
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's get started. I've got some timestamps and stuff, but I wanted to let you kind of take the helm at first and kind of lead us down where you wanted to go and what you thought most about this movie.
Okay, well, in my view, Rosemary's Baby is one of the scariest movies ever made, and it tops any kind of slasher movie, Halloween, Friday the 13th, any of this stuff. It tops The Exorcist and The Omen, as unsettling and disturbing as those movies were. And the reason I think this one is so scary is because so much of it is rooted in reality.
Yes.
It depicts aspects of trauma-based mind control, Satanism, and satanic ritual abuse. And researchers like you and I have come to comprehend that these are very real things that unfortunately do permeate all areas of society.
Yes.
I remember my parents telling me about this movie. They went to see it in the cinema when it came out in 1968. And my mum said she didn't sleep for about a week afterwards because it had that kind of disturbing effect on her. I can totally understand why. Cinema audiences must have been traumatized coming out of the theater having just seen that.
Yeah.
And it spoke to the Satanism that was permeating popular culture at the time. In the 1960s, yes. You had the high priest of the Church of Satan and the author of the Satanic Bible, Anton LaVey, who made the comment that Rosemary's Baby was the best commercial for the Church of Satan that he could ever have wished for.
Yeah.
And it's rumored that LaVey actually appears in the movie playing the part of the devil. I don't think this has ever been confirmed, but it's one of those legends in the world of films that LaVey played that part and is supposed to have been a consultant scriptwriter.
I know that he was a consultant.
Right.
I saw a documentary with Mia Farrow describing after that scene with the man in the makeup costume. He, after he's writhing on her, he like respectfully shakes her hand and says, "A pleasure meeting or working with you." She didn't mention that it was Anton LaVey. It seemed as though he was just another actor. But
Right.
please go ahead. I just wanted to interject and say that.
Sure. So at the time, you had the popularity of the Church of Satan, and you had a number of celebrities at the time who were members of this organization. So famously, Sammy Davis Jr., Jane Mansfield, who met an unfortunate end with Sam Brody, an actor that was involved in a terrible car accident during the 60s. And is said to have got into an argument with LaVey, and it's rumored that he may have had something to do with that accident.
Right.
Then in latter years, you had Mark Ullman of the group Soft Cell, who was a member of the Church of Satan, and also Marilyn Manson. That's a surprise, isn't it?
Right.
So you had quite a number of famous people that were affiliated with that organization. Also in the 60s, you had the popularity of the Temple of Set, which was the organization of Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino,
Right.
as a kind of rival organization, if you like, to the Church of Satan.
Mm.
You also had the Process Church of the Final Judgment coming out of San Francisco, and that was very heavily linked to the hippie counterculture psychedelic scene of the time. And then you had all the music. Loads of rock musicians were dabbling with Satanism. In 1967, towards the end of that year, you had the Rolling Stones release their album, Their Satanic Majesty's Request.
Yes.
And then you had musicians like Jimmy Page, who was very into the works of Aleister Crowley and made no secret of his fascination with the occult. And the Beatles were dabbling with the occult as well, as were many of the groups involved in the psychedelic scene. So the idea of Satanism was very firmly entrenched in popular culture by the time Rosemary's Baby came along. So it was released in June of 1968. And the amount of parallels that's come up in my research previously with the music and the culture of the Beatles is absolutely astounding. You can attribute it to this phenomenon that's known as synchromysticism.
Mm.
And you can wonder whether it was actually possible for all these links to have been the product of human planning, or whether it goes beyond the confines of a human mind to the forces of nature and the forces of creation itself causing all these things to happen. Because the amount of crossovers and apparent coincidences linking aspects of the Beatles with aspects of this movie are just absolutely crazy. And we can go into some of these if you like.
Right. Well, yes, I would love that. If actually, when you mentioned a few things, you mentioned Sammy Davis Jr. and you mentioned the idea of the zeitgeist of the time of the 50s into the 60s. And if you remember, there was a point where Rosemary has a book titled All of Them Witches, given to her by Hutch. And Guy, her husband, takes it away from her and he puts it up on the bookshelf. And if you like to watch movies, bookshelves are loaded with information. You know, they can just give you just a glance. You see the spine of all these books.
Hit that pause button.
Yeah, exactly.
And study.
Yes. At 1 hour, 33 minutes and 55 seconds, he puts the book right on top of Alfred Kinsey's Sexual Behavior in the Human Male and Sexual Behavior in the Human Female. And those books are right next to Yes, I Can, the autobiography of Sammy Davis Jr. And Yes, I Can is somewhat reminiscent of Obama's Yes, We Can. And if you know about Freeman, he popularized Obama's theme of Yes, We Can. If you play that backwards, it says, thank you, Satan. That's right. Just want to put that one in there. But there's also Listening with the Third Ear, which was written by a psychoanalyst who was trained by Freud. And it's the third ear is like the skill of a psychoanalyst listening consciously and unconsciously to like it's a way of psychoanalysis, right? And another one of the books is the Western intellectual traditions, right? So you got mind psychoanalysis, the tradition of Western culture, and then destruction of morality with Kinsey. And then all the way to the right is Sammy Davis Jr. talking about his life as a Satan worshiper And he says, yes, I can. He has succeeded so far that he can even write a book, and somebody's going to buy it and put it on their goddamn shelf. So I just want to say that he ties in a lot of the culture of the time. Like there's an Alberto Giacometti figure. He's a sculptor who did lots of like bronze sculptures of tall, thin figures. And they were like impressions of people hurrying in a big city, emaciated figures, like Rosemary was when she was in all that pain, and her eyes were all black and sunken in. And it's an expression of existential fear, insignificance, and loneliness of mankind. It's like it feels sad, lonely, and difficult to relate to. And it's like in the window. And these are like popular sculptures of the time of the 60s. There's this existentialist art, that's just like depicting man as like this just clumps of black that were emaciated and skinny. I mean, it's depicting mankind as like this rotten, emaciated. So basically it's like the destruction of man. It's depicting how this culture is destroying mankind, and it's just like little snippets can show you that with the art of photography. So please continue. Talk about how the Beatles. Tell us what you find about the Beatles and how it relates to this film. The significant things that you remember most.
Well, just before I get on to the Beatles, just picking up on what you were saying there about Alfred Kinsey, who was a noted sexologist in the 1960s. By all accounts, a sexual pervert himself as well. Why would that even be a surprise? I remember Janice Barcelo at one of the Free Your Mind conferences was going into the true nature of Kinsey and what he was all about. Some of the stuff she said has stayed with me to this day. The interesting thing about Kinsey is that he and Kenneth Anger, who was a satanic filmmaker of the 1960s, still alive today, I believe, living in LA. But Kenneth Anger made a series of short films, including Lucifer Rising and Invocation of My Demon Brother. And he was very closely associated with the Rolling Stones. Mick Jagger provided the soundtrack of I think it was Lucifer Rising, and then Jimmy Page did the soundtrack to Invocation of My Demon Brother.
He
also had an affiliation. Sorry?
Bobby Beausoleil was in Lucifer Rising. Bobby Beausoleil is related to the Manson murders.
Exactly. So Bobby Beausoleil is one of Charles Manson's disciples, so-called. And he came up with the first soundtrack for Kenneth Anger's Invocation of My Demon Brother. And the two of them were said to have been lovers. And then for one reason or another, Jimmy Page was recruited to produce a different version of the soundtrack for that film. I mean, they're all Satanists one way or another, occultists. But Kenneth Anger went out to the Abbey of Thelema in Sicily with Alfred Kinsey because they were both disciples of Aleister Crowley. And they were so into his works that they wanted to go out there to this so-called Abbey of Thelema, where Crowley is said to have developed this religious system of his. And they wanted to restore the place because, by all accounts, Crowley had not been too popular with the locals there. And they'd basically kicked him out.
Mussolini kicked him out. Mussolini kicked him out. The fascists didn't want him there. It's so disgusting what they were doing. I mean, you look at the paintings in the basement. I mean, imagine, and they used to take huge amounts of mescaline and opium and, cannabis hashish, and they would be in these states, in these darkened places with these most scary murals and what was happening in those rooms. You know what I mean? Like if you look at what Crowley was doing to his Scarlet Women, like branding them and, destroying their minds and the worst depravity, you know what I mean? He was full on psychopath, So anyway, continue, please.
So these two were big fans of his and they wanted to go out to the Abbey and restore it to its former glory. So the story goes. So they made that trip at some point during the 1960s. But getting on to all this amazing synchromysticism between the Beatles and Rosemary's Baby, it's difficult to know where to start. So got to start somewhere. So the Beatles put out their White Album in November of 1968. And that album, many of the songs were said to have been inspired by this famous trip that they went on to India in February of 68 to study under this Maharishi. And on that trip, as well as the Beatles and their wives and girlfriends, was Mia Farrow, the star of Rosemary's Baby,
I forgot about
along
that.
with her sister, whose name was Prudence.
Yes,
And it
Dear
was Mia
Prudence.
Farrow's sister who inspired the Beatles record Dear Prudence, where they've
Yes.
got the lyric, Dear Prudence, won't you come out to play? So the
Yes.
story is that Mia Farrow's sister pretty much confined herself to a bungalow in this compound and wouldn't come out and join in the transcendental meditation and the yoga and stuff that the others were doing. So
Probably
that
because they're
inspired that song.
Satanists. She was scared of them. Go ahead.
Maybe. So Mia Farrow was on that trip, and she was obviously a friend of the Beatles.
Right.
She had been married to Frank Sinatra up
Yes.
to that point.
Thank you for bringing that up.
And she went on to marry Woody Allen later on, seeing as we're talking about pedophiles. But earlier on, she was married to Frank Sinatra, who reportedly did not want her to do the film Rosemary's Baby,
Right.
because he wanted her to be a kind of kept woman, a sort of trophy wife.
He had another
wanted her
movie.
to give up her career.
He had another film that he wanted her to be an actress on.
Right.
And it was the filming of Rosemary's Baby ran long, and he was mad that she was still doing it. And he was like, it's either that movie or me, babe. And he's like, forget about you, I'll get another one. You know what I mean? And if you look at Frank Sinatra, if you know about, if you are familiar with Bryce Taylor and her Thanks for the Memories, Frank Sinatra was a sadistic enforcer who would beat women to bloody edge of life to enforce the rules of the cult. For Bob Hope owned her, and Bob Hope would like send her over there to get reworked and tooled up by Frank Sinatra.
He was a handler.
Right. So please continue.
So yeah, there's connections for days. Frank Sinatra's hairstylist in Hollywood was a guy by the name of Jay Sebring, who just happened to have been one of the victims of the Manson so-called killings. And we have connections going into those. Also, Frank Sinatra was, of course, in the Rat Pack with the previously mentioned Sammy Davis Jr. So there's links all over the place. As you mentioned, Roman Polanski originally wanted the role of Rosemary to go to either his wife, Sharon Tate, or Tuesday Weld. But in the end, he was persuaded to hire Mia Farrow and go for that waif kind of type look. She looked very similar, actually, to a supermodel that was part of the swinging London scene, the counterculture coming out of London in the 1960s, Carnaby Street and all this, by the name of Twiggy. If you look up a model called Twiggy, waif-like, very, very thin, similar hairstyle, looked very much like Mia Farrow.
Twiggy is the name of one of Marilyn Manson's bandmates. They all have like a model's first name and then like a murderer's last name. I think it was like Twiggy Ramirez was his name. And
nice touch.
Yeah, right. I've actually been to a couple Manson shows back in the day, and I was with a friend of mine and his younger sister, who was 15. She was very cute. And she was asked by one of the people who worked at the place, hey, want to go backstage with Twiggy? How old are you? And she like looked him dead in the eye and said, I'm 15, and turned around and walked away. But she was invited to go party with Manson and Twiggy and all of them. So, I mean, that's a firsthand account of some. But anyway, we don't need to talk about him today. But please continue. I didn't mean to derail us on that.
Well, I'm just trying to recall all these crazy connections between the Beatles and Rosemary's Baby. So we mentioned the India trip. Mia Farrow was on that trip.
Right.
So on the album, the White Album, you had the track written and sung by McCartney, called Helter Skelter. And this is said to have inspired Charles Manson to have deployed his followers to go up to the Tate residence on that fateful night, 8th of August, 1969, and commit those terrible killings involving Sharon Tate and 4 others, the so-called Tate LaBianca killings. So that's 2 separate events on the 8th and the 9th of August 1969. But it's gone down in legend, in myth, that Helter Skelter, this Beatles record, in some way inspired Manson to bring that about. It spoke to him in some way. He interpreted all kinds of meaning in the lyrics. He's talking about this bizarre race war that he foretold or foresaw happening between the blacks and the whites in California at the time. So you got a connection there between the White Album going into Sharon Tate, the wife of Roman Polanski, of course. One of the main connections would have to be the Dakota Building in New York, outside which John Lennon of the Beatles was assassinated in December 1980, because the Dakota Building appears in Rosemary's Baby and is actually the setting for the story. It's called the Bramford in the film, but you get exterior shots of the Dakota Building at the very start of the film and also over the end credits. I think most of the interiors were shot on a film set in Hollywood, but you do get the exteriors of the Dakota there. And there's one very interesting scene where towards the start of the film, you have this young woman who's staying with the old couple, the Castevets. And her name's Terry, is it? I think in the film.
Terry.
Yeah. So she's said to be this recovering drug addict, this runaway girl. And the Castevets have taken her in and they're looking after her, although not doing a great job, because towards the start of the film, you find that she's fallen to her death from their top room window, and she's, you know, in a right mess on the pavement down below. A very interesting thing is that if you do one of the freeze frames that you just mentioned there with the pause button, you see that right at the spot where John Lennon years later would be assassinated, there is a white Volkswagen Beetle car. And it's splattered with blood. And it becomes very eerie when you realize that that's pretty much the spot where he would have collapsed after he was reportedly shot by Mark David Chapman on that day.
And where, I mean, wasn't the Volkswagen Beetle a popular car that, I mean, wasn't Ted Bundy driving a Volkswagen Beetle? I mean, and when was Ted Bundy doing his murders? And when the Castevets arrived, their first moment on the film, as they're walking up in their silly garb, that VW bug is highlighted to the right of the screen. And then there's like someone steps into the frame and they step into the place where the Beetle was, but it was lit up and framed so that we would see it. And also you talked about Jay Sebring and the hairstylist. And if you look at Rosemary's Baby, she says that she had her hair styled by Vidal Sassoon, and that's in the credits. And she starts with the bobbed cut that Vidal Sassoon made popular. And that's like taking the long hair away from the female. And then they go even further and give her like a boy hair. And it's like that's like the mirroring of the trans, you know, the way that the Satanists like to mirror nature. And the fact that if you look at Vidal Sassoon he's been knighted. He's a knight of the British Crown. Right. And then, you know, speaking of knights, I also wanted to just mention this real quick, is that when Guy is talking, is all happy because of the Castevets like tell him about the power that, you know, their first meeting, and he's describing the names, he's listing the names of the people, the actors who Roman Cassavetes had enticed him with. In the list of, there's two actors, and they're both British from the Victorian era, and both of them are knighted, which I could give their names here in a second. But yeah, here, Johnston Forbes Robertson was one of the names, and the other one was Henry Irving. And both of them, one of them was the most famous actor he was the Hamlet of the Victorian era. And this other one, Henry Irving, was like, he changed the game on the setting of a play, doing the lighting and that whole shenanigans. And he was like, he did the light, and he was an actor, and he was producing, and he was like a jack of all trades as far as that. But the fact that they're knighted, and it's like part of the biggest cult, that of royalty and royal families and bloodlines, I just wanted to get that in there while it was on my mind.
Sure. Well, another thing about her change of hairstyle as well is that she goes partway through the movie from having that bob that you mentioned to having the very closely cut, boyish hair.
Yeah.
And in a lot of the research that I've done into the music industry, I've come to realize that when you get artists who undergo a physical transformation and they reappear into the public eye after a period away with closely cropped blonde hair,
oh yeah,
it's indicative of mind control programming having taken place.
right.
Because so many prominent musicians and public figures and celebrities of all kinds unfortunately will have undergone trauma-based mind control. It's absolutely
right.
institutionalized within these industries.
Right.
And I was looking at pop stars from quite recent years where you get example after example of them reappearing with this kind of hairstyle.
Right.
So it happened with Katy Perry, it happened with Miley Cyrus,
Kanye West.
with Kanye West even.
Yeah.
And Eminem's trademark look is
Yes.
this sort of mind control hairstyle.
Right.
And it might sound
And
ridiculous to
also
people,
with
but
the
it's a method of communication.
Eminem is multiple personalities. Who's the real
That's right.
Slim Shady? There's a million
That's
of
right.
them,
That's what Slim Shady is all about. His alter
Right.
ego. It's one of his mind control alters, which they all
Yes.
have.
Right.
So Rosemary's Baby is actually a movie about mind control and satanic ritual abuse.
Yes.
In the same way that many of Kubrick's movies are about
Yes.
this, as you've examined
Exactly.
yourself. So people
Exactly.
think The Shining is a movie about a guy who's a caretaker at a hotel and he goes a bit crazy from the winter and tries to chop up his family with an axe. It's not. It's about so many other things. People think Eyes Wide Shut is about sexual jealousy. I remember the critics' reviews when that movie came out. They were like, oh, yeah, it's Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman just talking about sexual jealousy and fantasy and stuff. No. It's about institutionalized mind control and satanic ritual abuse and bloodlines and all of this.
Exactly.
And so with Rosemary's Baby, even with that, you think it's a film about this group of Satanists and they impregnate this poor woman, Rosemary, with the devil when she has his baby. Well, yes, it is about that, but it's about more than that.
Right.
And that, going back to the start of the conversation, is what makes it so chilling for me. Because I realize that it's telling you what really goes on.
Exactly.
Institutionalized satanic ritual abuse, going through generations, going through different families, different bloodlines.
The breeders, the experience.
We get an insight into the concept of bloodlines in this movie.
Right. Yes.
Because Roman Cassavetes is strongly hinted to be the reincarnation of this, what was his name? Stephen Mercato.
Oh, Stephen Mercato is his real name. Roman Cassavetes is the name that he gives to others because because of his father was the famous witch who
yeah. So he's coming from a long running line, a family bloodline of witches, and he's the latest incarnation of it. Yeah.
Right.
So that's what it is.
And his father was doing the same thing, and he's doing the same thing.
And all operating out of that same building as well. That's always the setting for it.
Yes, exactly. And that's where that's the focus of their ritual. The fact that So it is the experience of the victim, the breeder, right? So we know that SRA is happening, even though out there in the world it looks like normal life. Just like in the beginning of Rosemary's Baby, you're looking out over the rooftops. Oh, normal New York City. Oh, what's under all those rooftops? You know what I mean? Oh, normal people, right? And then you dig into one of their just one of the buildings, and you got this evil Satanism festering, and it gives the impression like this could be in all of these houses. Like this is what New York is, right? And so basically, so we know that SRA is happening. We know that they are just there under the surface. That's what Eyes Wide Shut was showing us. Like all of the evil is just under the surface. You got to open your eyes and it's there. Like murder, rape, pedophilia, all those things to the normal person. Oh, that's normal. Okay, whatever. Nothing strange here, And then he falls into this opening of seeing what it is.
With such respectable facades as well.
Right.
So Rosemary comes to discover that pretty much everyone around her is a part of this satanic cult, but you would never know it.
All of them.
You would never know it from looking at them. So you got the slightly eccentric but kindly old couple next door.
Slightly.
You've got their friend Laura Louise. You've got the doctor, Dr. Saperstein. You've got all these other people that are a part of the cult, but they just appear to be completely normal and everyday folk.
Right.
And this speaks to many of these groups and these secret societies that we have in reality. Exactly. You would never ordinarily suspect most of their members of being a part of things. And also in the narrative, it speaks to this concept that I've got into countless times in my work of artists of all kinds selling their soul for fame and fortune.
Right.
And this is what we see with Guy, the John Cassavetes character. Right. So he's a wannabe actor. He's a struggling stage actor. He's not getting the success that he wants. He unwittingly falls in with this bunch of Satanists, and it's hinted that they can make that success happen for him that he so craves, because they're connected in that way. They can make anything like this happen. Right. And so they fix it for him to get a role in this play that he really wants by causing the actor who had previously played that role to go blind.
Witchcraft.
And so, right. So Guy gets his job and he's on the road to success, but it comes at a price. Now they want something from him. He's got to pay them back. And the price that he pays is by giving up his wife to the cult so that she can be impregnated by the devil. Right. So there's no such thing as a free lunch. And fame and fortune comes at a very high cost. And the movie reminds us of this.
Roman Polanski knows that well. Yes. I mean, like
well, look what happened to his wife.
Exactly.
If it happened.
Well, yes. I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know. But the story goes that she was horrifically murdered. They pulled her uterus out of her. And anyway, her little dog was named Saperstein as she was raising her baby. And I don't know if the dog was there that night. But anyway, so this idea of Rosemary's Baby was known to her and was a fun enough thing that they would name the dog that. And Rosemary's Baby was still in the theaters when this happened. And if you look at Charles Manson's history, you will find that he was raised, or he was for a long time in Boys Town, which is where the Franklin scandal happened. And it's an institution which is basically a jail for kids. And it was torture, satanic ritual abuse, and they were, giving the kids to politicians. There was the Franklin scandal. You'll understand it if you look that up. I know you do, but I'm talking to listeners.
It's everywhere you look.
Right. And so Manson was also, while he was in jail, he signed up for the MK Ultra LSD trials. He was part of that as well. So who knows what they were programming in his mind to make him think that Helter Skelter is going to be a thing. You know, they can layer in people that, you know, trauma-based mind control victims can have programs layered in that their main alter or their main self doesn't recognize is there. And then when the triggers arise, then they're doing their mission. You know what I mean? So I am under the suspicion that Mr. Manson was working for them one way or another. You know, he was doing the drug dealing and he was into the music scene, but I believe that he is one of them who was handling others because he was such a good, you know, victim, I guess. Like they abuse their own and they place them in places of power to do the deeds of the cult, you know. And I believe
Never mind all of them witches, it's all of them MK Ultra.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. All of them run by the CIA, run by the
That's
Crown.
right. Those
the
nice
Crown.
people, Langley.
Yeah.
And Manson was affiliated with the Process Church of the Final Judgment.
Yes.
And also linked into that organization, you have David Berkowitz, who was the son of Sam, or
Right.
said to be the son of Sam Killer in that spate of serial killings in the 1970s. And also Sirhan Sirhan, who is said to have assassinated Robert Kennedy in 1968, although seemingly it was somebody else and Sirhan Sirhan was there to take the can for it, in the same way that Mark Chapman was with John Lennon years later. But you've got hints of MK Ultra with all of these people, and there's Satanism going into that as well, and the tentacles of the intelligence community, and particularly the CIA, go into all of that as well.
They create soldiers. They create perfect robots to do their will, you know, biological robots programmed with hypnosis and trauma. It's, you know, it's unfathomable to a regular person. And it's something
got another.
that,
yeah, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I've got another really interesting link going into the Beatles as well, seeing as we're talking about MK Ultra and mind control and SRA and such. If you look at the main movie poster for Rosemary's Baby, you've got Rosemary laid on her back, so you get a side view of her face, and it's very dreamlike and quite surreal. And then you've got a very small image of the pram containing her baby, which is positioned in front of her face as if it's part of her mind, as if it's in her mind. Now, if you look at the sleeve to John Lennon's Mind Games album from 1973, it looks very similar to the effect that you get on the Rosemary's Baby movie poster. So you've got a profile view of Lennon's head, and he's laid back in exactly the same way that Rosemary is.
Really?
And then in the single version of the song, you've got John Lennon's face, but you've got Yoko Ono's profile melded into the top of his head so that the two just kind of merge in.
Scary.
And it creates the idea that Yoko Ono was literally in his mind and was a part of his thoughts.
And she's
this
a witch.
is very well, she was a witch. She put an album out called Yes, I'm a Witch.
Yes.
And this reinforces the very popular common belief that Yoko Ono was actually John Lennon's mind control handler that was sent into his world at that key point to keep him on track. And it was a very strange relationship that they had. It was more like a mother and son relationship than two lovers.
So weird.
He even used to refer to her as mother, and she had such a dominant stranglehold over him. But the idea, just the fact that you've got this blurring of images where Yoko's head is melting into John's does back up this idea that she was some kind of handler for him. And now what is it? On this particular version of the sleeve, whereas with Rosemary's Baby, you've got the pram, a miniature of the pram in the foreground of the image. On John Lennon's Mind Games sleeve, you've got a small rendering of John a small figure of John.
Oh, he's the baby.
As if he's the subject.
Yeah. Or he's Rosemary's
the
baby. He's the Satan baby.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of researchers
bigger than Jesus, right? Bigger than Jesus.
That MK Ultra mind control was present in the story of the Beatles, and particularly with John Lennon. MK Ultra would certainly appear to be present when it comes to Lennon's assassin, Mark Chapman. If indeed he was the assassin, because again, some researchers think that somebody else actually carried out the hit, but Chapman had been programmed to carry the can for it and be the patsy for it. But Chapman showed all signs of being MK Ultra and being a Manchurian candidate style assassin. He had a long history with the CIA. He worked with a whole bunch of CIA front companies. But many people think that John himself and possibly the other Beatles had been subject to MK Ultra. John Lennon certainly exhibited many of the sporadic, haphazard character traits that mind control victims do. He seemed to be schizophrenic. He seemed to switch from one personality to another at the drop of a hat. And these are all systematic of trauma-based mind control and the different alters that are created through this style of programming.
Yes. And speaking of okay, one thing I just wanted to say relating to the Beatles, Sergeant Pepper, if you look up what tannis root, it's called devil's pepper. Devil's pepper is the name of this tannis root. And when did Sergeant Pepper came out in 67, right? That was
June 67.
So that was a year after Rosemary's Baby. And you had, you know, Crowley on the cover, and
as the year before Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, okay. I thought Rosemary's Baby was 66.
Well, this is the interesting thing about it. Rosemary's Baby was released in 68, but the storyline was set in 1965 going into 1966.
Right.
And there's a point where you see a 1966 calendar, and the Sidney Blackmer character points to the calendar and he says it's year one.
Yes.
So in other words, 1966 is year one.
Yes.
And that is the year in which Anton LaVey founded the Church of Satan.
Exactly. Yes.
So that movie is very closely linked to the formation of the Church of Satan. And they even went so far as to set the movie 2 years back in time to make it 1966.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. That's great. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to make sure that gets mentioned. Year one is important. And, you know, it's the new aeon of Satanism, you know, like 67 was everything. It was like the high point, and then everything dissolved and turned into murder and drugs and death and fear. You know, all the young kids, they all left home and hitchhiked to California to go have some free acid in the streets, you know, and go find some long-haired friends. And they were all easy victims, you know. Oh, Jimmy left home, he went to California. No, I haven't heard from him. Where'd he go? Who knows? You know what I mean? They're all like hitchhiking. They're all out there just victims. And all of these Satan, I mean, they want easy pickings. And then that was if you read in the Dave McGowan, that entire era of serial killers just dawned right there after,
that's right,
you know, the Manson murder, and that was like the opening of the age, you know. And even now we still have school shootings and false flags and all that shit. You know what I mean? We had a shooting on the opening of the Season of Sacrifice just a couple of days ago.
Yep.
It's still
right on cue.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's all MK Ultra, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That's what we're seeing playing out here.
Right.
All these serial killers that we had. You know, serial killers is really passé now. It's really unfashionable. It's just kind of drifted out of culture. But for a time in the 1970s, it was all the rage. There were
Right.
all kinds of serial killers. And
Right.
it seems to me it was all part of MK Ultra experimentation. And it
Mhm.
had been decided that there was going to be an agenda where they would program these killers to go
Yes.
out and do their thing. And
Yes.
they were, obviously monitoring and surveilling the results and all of this. But there came a point where they kind of wound that up and moved on to the next stage of it.
Right. If you look, the serial killers, all of them had multiple personality. Like Ted Bundy could change his physical appearance. Like there were witnesses that say that Ted Bundy changed his face in front of them. And that happens with multiple personalities. Fritz Springmeier writes about this. People will get facial features like moles and stuff that appear when the other alter is in the seat of their consciousness. And it's amazing what the mind has, the control the mind has over the body, like what it can do to the face. And so these people like Ted Bundy and Berkowitz, and they were themselves multiples. And then if you look at the school shootings, like the Aurora, the Batman movie theater shooting and the Adam Lanza and shit, all of those, they were all obviously multiple personality mind control slaves, just like Sirhan Sirhan. It's the same actors, but it's just a different. They're shooting kids at schools instead of like random girls in cars with, and the girls in cars with the Ted Bundy thing. Just was it Ted Bundy that they were cutting their hair in the bob cut because he was like going for long-haired women, and then all the women were scared so they all cut their hair short like that.
Debbie Harry tells the story that she narrowly escaped the clutches of Ted Bundy. Have you heard that one?
No, I haven't.
Debbie Harry of Blondie. She says that during her years pre-fame with Blondie, when Ted Bundy was on the rampage and doing his thing, in an interview, she's claimed that she once accepted a lift from him in Manhattan. And she got in the car and she noticed that the interior of the car had no door handles that you could open from the inside. And I don't know how she managed to get out, but she tells the story that she panicked and she got the hell out of the car.
Maybe she didn't close the door, maybe.
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is a story that she's
survived.
Told.
God, like, holy crap. But she
in
was
my
in there.
Musical Truth Volume 2, I've got some links between other serial killers and musicians in the punk new wave scene.
Right.
So the connections are just ridiculous, how you can go from musicians and the world of MK Ultra as it plays out in the music game into the serial killer game.
Right. I mean,
and then into the intelligence communities.
Right. And look at Bobby Beausoleil and Kenneth Anger and all of them. Like it's the same,
That's right.
Music, movies, and murderers, like all kind of melding into one big pot.
That's right. I've got something interesting here for you concerning buildings in New York. So I'd just like to go through this.
All right.
Because I think you'll find this quite interesting. So we've spoken about the Dakota, and you had the young girl, Terry, who falls to her death tragically early on in the film.
Pool of blood.
And that's the end of her.
Yes.
Now, across town from the Dakota, you've got a building in New York known as the Chelsea Hotel.
Oh.
And this figured majorly in my research for Musical Truth Volume 2 as well, because there have been a ridiculous amount of musicians and actors and playwrights and film directors and people connected with the performing arts in every conceivable way who had a connection to the Chelsea Hotel. It's very dark and very unsettling in many ways. There's been lots of deaths there. Lots of famous people have died within the hotel. It's where Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols is said to have stabbed his girlfriend Nancy Spungen to death within one of the Chelsea's rooms, although I think there was more to that particular story than we were told. You got all kinds of things like Arthur C. Clarke wrote the screenplay to 2001: A Space Odyssey in one of the rooms of the Chelsea.
That figures.
And then you've got famous playwrights, and a few people are said to have leapt to their death from there. So many researchers.
Led Zeppelin they would trash the halls. John Bonham used to ride it. He rode a Harley Davidson down the hallway, And
Probably.
they would have many underage women servicing the musicians, including, uh, our boy there, the guitarist Jimmy Page, was famous for, his girlfriend was 14, wasn't she? And she was also banging the guy from the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger, right?
Yeah, that's right. Laurie Maddox, Lightning Laurie. And Jimmy
Lightning,
Page has
super
openly,
fast.
yeah, he's openly admitted in interviews to having carried on with this 14-year-old girl. But as far as I'm aware, there's never been a at
Nobody
his
cares
door.
about that. Yeah, he's part of the
So
club.
friends in high places, it would
Right.
seem.
Yeah. Meanwhile,
Anyway,
Roman Polanski gets thrown under the bus and he has to go around.
exactly.
Go
exactly. I guess he didn't renew his membership up at the lodge.
Right.
So you've got this place, the Chelsea, and you've got all kinds of strange stuff that went on there. And some researchers seem to think that there might be a mind control facility located within the hotel in the hidden depths of it.
That makes sense.
Actually, Elvis Costello, in his song "I Don't Want to Go to Chelsea," most people assume that as he was based in London, he was talking about Chelsea in London. But I think it's more likely that he was talking about the Chelsea Hotel in New York, because one of the lyrics in it goes, "Men in white coats come and shake you gently by the throat," or something like that. So it suggests that there's MK Ultra doctors and there's all kinds of experimentation. And people have spoken of satanic rituals that have taken place there, and people have been seen in robes disappearing into the hotel's basement. Yeah. So it's a very strange place, and it could well house some sort of MK Ultra facility there. Right. The reason I mention it, though, is because there's another building that I want to link it to. And this is just over an adjacent side of Central Park to the Dakota building in New York. And it's known as the Essex Hotel. And it came up in research I was doing just a couple of weeks ago for my upcoming book. So the next book is Musical Truth, Volume 3. And I'm looking into the very strange and very untimely death of the soul singer Donny Hathaway, who not a lot of researchers talk about. What happened to him was very tragic. He's a great musician. He made socially conscious music, very similar to what Marvin Gaye was doing with What's Going On. And he was putting out lots of this great stuff. So Donny Hathaway died on the 13th of January, 1979, at the age of 33, interesting age. And it's said that he committed suicide by jumping from the 15th floor balcony of his New York hotel room, which was in this place known as the Essex Hotel. But there are many red flags and anomalies and discrepancies and stuff. And I go into some of these in the book.
While you're looking it up, let me just say that Essex in Massachusetts, Essex, the town, used to be named Salem. Salem was a greater area that was broken up into smaller towns. And Salem, Danvers, and Essex were all one big thing called Salem, which was famous for witches and that whole thing. So Essex, in its name, is a reference to witches, just because the Essex, there were covens in Essex as well as Salem. It was all connected. And yeah, so go ahead.
It's never long till we circle back round to witchcraft again, is it?
Yeah.
Dark occult stuff. So just a bit more on the Donny Hathaway circumstances. So I'll just read what I've written here. It turns out that the hotel room from which Hathaway is said to have leapt to his death, New York's Essex House Hotel on an adjacent side of Central Park to the Dakota, mentioning Rosemary's Baby, has a reputation as being something of an MK Ultra safe house, rather like the Chelsea Hotel. The glass from Hathaway's hotel window had been carefully removed, a specialist operation, and placed on the bed. The Essex was owned by hoteling tycoon J. Willard Marriott, who was extremely well connected to the CIA and to other government departments, as well as being a Freemason. Marriott was a board member of the Mayo Clinic, one of the key hospitals involved in the CIA's MK Ultra mind control experimentation. The Essex was the place in town where visiting Washington, D.C. officials regularly stayed. So, however it occurred, it seems that Donny Hathaway was embroiled within the MK Ultra mind control experimentation program. And for whatever reason, it was decided that he'd outlived his usefulness, because I don't buy the suggestion that he decided to end it all at the age of 33 just by jumping from his hotel window, particularly as he was in the middle of a recording session at the time. He was on a recording project with this producer, James M. Toomey, and another guy, Reggie Lucas. And as we so often hear in cases where artists apparently commit suicide, he was in good spirits and he was looking forward to completing the project. He certainly didn't strike anyone as the kind of guy that was going to go off and take his own life, you know.
And
so
if you look at the gentleman who supposedly jumped out a window high on LSD, connected to the CIA, I've looked into that, and there's a CIA manual that talks about how to get rid of somebody. It's throw them out a window. I mean,
right.
It's an MO that they have written down in a book that's documented, and so, and the fact that they removed the pain is so, I mean, if he was pushed, then there would be more glass pushed out, and like what, and the guy's not gonna jump through.
We're supposed to believe
window.
that Donnie had enough of this world,
right.
So he went out and got himself some specialist precision glass cutting equipment so that he could do a proper job of removing the pain, so he didn't make too much of a mess for the staff to have to clear up afterwards. Yeah,
it's such.
That happened to Ridley Scott's brother, didn't it? Tony Scott. He died after plunging to his death from the top of a building.
Yeah, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, very sudden and unexpected.
Yeah, and now they hang you from a red thing from a doorknob, just like
a red silk scarf. Yeah,
red scarf. Yeah, exactly. That's the new MO.
Hey, how about you must have heard about Princess Kate, Prince William's wife, appearing when she presented her new baby, Prince Louis, in the same dress that Mia Farrow was wearing in Rosemary's Baby. You must have seen that.
Yes,
right?
I did. And that was very choice. I mean, there's other pictures of one of the kids, William or Harry maybe, and he's holding up a baby goat, and he's got like the rear hoof, and he's holding it up in the air smiling. Like the hoof of a goat is it's like Pan. They show these in pictures. Definitely. They're just like, ha ha ha, hey, look at me, I'm a Satan guy. It's just, they're having fun with it. It's really
so gross. I don't know what possible reason there would have been, as far as the official cover story goes, for Kate to appear in the same dress that Rosemary was wearing. Well, this kind of blood red dress with a white collar. Right. And she's presenting her baby. Right. Why would you, how can that possibly be a coincidence?
It's not a coincidence. It's a meme Rosemary's Baby has been created into, it is an archetype now. It's like part of our mind. Like, we've all seen it, we all know it. It's in there, and now it's a common archetype that we can all share. Like, everybody knows Aesop's fables. We can like talk about this thing, and it's like it's a nugget that we can pass between each other and to like share these ideas, and yeah, that's, sorry, I kind of ended up on an end there, but
sure.
The way that the way that it's all organized, and the way that they, all of them witches, I think that should be noted. And the fact that she has nowhere to go, and once you're in the clutches, they have your full world, your entire world controlled. And that's what these SRA victims have to deal with. I wanted that to be highlighted, because it's something that Polanski is like showing us is, this is how it's done, even though it's fictional with this, Satan incarnation, which could be not real, but the fact that they're crazy people that will enslave you and tie you down and rape you, that is real. Like, no matter whether they're Satan or not, crazy people do that shit. And it's a it's something that is actually scary, if you don't believe in Satan, and if you don't believe that some, ghost of evil can come and, like, I don't know. That's the whole idea of, like, we don't need to go into if it's a real thing, but we do know that crazy people believe it, and those crazy people are so damaged from their own abuse that they grow up to be these monsters, that psychopaths that have, and their intellect is so refined because they need to maintain this predatory behavior, and it takes cunning to to be a successful predator. Like, if we look at Hollywood and what the whole genre is, all of those people are kept slaves, and it's like Roman Polanski is showing us the reality of what these girls have to live. Even though he's putting it with the allegory of,
So it's said that Polanski was due to be directing a different film as his first feature film, and he was looking at another script. And then somebody sent him a copy of Ira Levin's book, which had been put out the previous year, 1967. Yeah. And he read Rosemary's Baby over a weekend, so the story goes. And he was so taken by the story, he thought, this is the one. Yes, I've got to do this movie. And he was very, very keen to do it. Now, do you feel that this constituted Polanski, in whatever way he could, trying to communicate the truth about what goes on in Hollywood and what goes on behind the scenes in all aspects of society through this work, in the same way that Kubrick is said to have done through Eyes Wide Shut? Do you think Polanski wanted to get the truth out, but he had to do it through the form of art because he couldn't come right out and say it?
Yes, exactly. Thank you for asking. That's great, because I wanted to bring up the fact that he gave the character of this Satanist, the leader of this coven, Roman Cassavetes. And Cassavetes is the name of the actor who sold his wife to the devil.
Whose initials are JC, incidentally.
Oh, really?
So John Cassavetes, JC, and he gets corrupted by the devil. Right. Jesus Christ,
he jumps right into the pool. There's no hesitation. That guy. And it's showing us that Roman is that guy. Roman is placing himself. And then later in the film, Hutch tells Rosemary it's an anagram. And we have to look at these Scrabble pieces. And in our mind, she's working it out, and we're working it out with her and rearranging the letters. And basically, it's showing us Roman Cassavetes. It's showing us it is there that Roman Polanski and John Cassavetes are the same. And then we understand what happens next to Polanski's baby, and his wife was a witch, basically. She was, her first movie was a satanic film. She was into the idea of the dark arts. She was not.
Eye of the Devil, wasn't it, with David Niven?
Yes. And she was slated to be, she was on the path, she was one of them.
Interesting that Roman was out of town at the time those attacks took place on his house, and Sharon and the baby and the others were killed. Roman just happened to be overseas on business.
Yeah. I saw an interview of him in 2000 with Charlie Rose, and Charlie Rose wanted to bring up the Manson murders, and they zoom in on Polanski's got kind of tearing up a little bit in the corners of his eyes, and it's you can tell that he's practiced this. It does not look real. He's just welling up, and actors can make that happen on a dime.
I wonder whether the Tate murders were real. I have to question it, because Sharon Tate's got the usual military background. Her father was a colonel, I think, Philip Tate. He was quite high up in the military. And you find that with some of the others. And, so many events that we're told happened a certain way didn't, we come to realize.
Right.
So I have to wonder whether it was a psyop designed to create terror and trauma, and also designed in part to put a lid on the very short-lived hippie dream.
Free love. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea that if you let people like Manson and his associates run rampant in society and do their drugs and live their crazy lifestyles, this is the way it's going to end up. So I have to wonder whether it was decided that that was an aspect of the 1960s that they wanted to very quickly dispose of and then move on to whatever the next social engineering agenda was.
Yes, it did. It's effective. It was effective for destroying the anti-war movement. It was effective for rallying all the blue-collar workers pro-war all of a sudden, and they hate those long hairs. It was very effective for the mind control. And then by the time Woodstock happened, they didn't need it anymore, and they got this next phase. And I like your skepticism, because, these days we see these fantastic murder situations like the Las Vegas shooting or the, Boston bombing, and they're clearly orchestrated show for the public,
And they're done at the hands of military intelligence.
Right.
And as Dave McGowan showed us, all the musicians and the Hollywood actors and stuff that were instrumental in that counterculture scene in the 1960s had family connections going into the military or military intelligence. And so it was with Sharon Tate and all the others.
And Dave McGowan tells us that all of the disgusting murderers that they were using in Vietnam to go burn all those villages and kill all those women and children, they came home. What are they going to do with these mind-controlled slaves that are perfect murderers? Oh, well, put them to work. Okay, the son of Sam. Get you some. They're all like if you read Dave's other book, the first
Program
one,
to Kill.
Yes, there is so much information, and it's so many names of murderers. It's not just the famous guys. They're all like ex-military and mind-controlled slaves, mostly, I guess. You got to read for yourself and decipher on your own. Of course, there's no proof with a lot of these things. You have to decipher, with a critical thinking mind, and sift through the inconsistencies and such.
Yeah.
But
there's one other observation I wanted to make as well, Sean.
Please
just
do.
one that occurred to me when I was looking at some stills from Rosemary's Baby today. And there's a point in the movie where Rosemary's getting very distressed. She's already had her hair cropped short by that point.
Mm-hmm.
And she appears to have these black rings around her eyes.
Yeah.
And this is very consistent with what we're hearing now regarding the concept of adrenochrome.
Right. And the panda
Yep.
is like what they do to the kids. They abuse their faces so hard, and they rape
Yep.
them so bad that their eyeballs pop out, and all their blood vessels get black eyes from the sodomy. It's so fucked.
And you see all these famous people as well that are supposedly indulging in this kind of activity. Prince Philip's the classic one. You never see Prince Philip these days without two bloody black eyes. I mean, he looks like an exhumed corpse at the best of times. They're trying to make out he came out of hospital just the other day at the age of 99. And he's doing well, folks. He's in good spirits.
Yeah.
It just looks like he's been bashed in the face with a garden shovel for about 3 days.
Yeah.
It actually looks like they dug his body up out of the grave and they've just stuck some electrodes in him to animate him, and they're making out he's still alive. But he and so many others appear with these black rings around their eyes. Right. It's known as the Black Eye Club. So many famous people.
Yes.
And it's suggested that the ingesting of adrenochrome causes this reaction in the human body, in the face, and particularly when you go long periods without being able to get the adrenochrome.
Yeah.
it can cause the eyes to go black in this way.
Fried
So it's very
fish.
interesting that we got Rosemary, you know, all those decades back. Nobody was talking about adrenochrome then. Nobody in regular society had any idea about this stuff. But what if that was a reference to it,
Right.
a knowing nod from Polanski, who would have been in a position to know? And it's only now, with the availability of the internet, that we're able to fully comprehend what this is all about.
Right. Plus, there was the nod where he talked about the sisters that lived in that building, the Thatch sisters. I forget the name of, but they killed and ate children. That was what I mean, and they were making jokes about that. And like I said in other podcasts, humans are drugs. You know, the elite can squeeze the juice out of our brains. It's not just adrenaline. There's all kinds of stuff in the blood. You know, it's a orchestra of, you know, chemicals that they can get high on. And they're hijacking the little systems of these poor victims.
You just reminded me of an early scene in The Shining, just to circle back round to Kubrick,
Right.
where they're in the car going up the mountain to the hotel. And Jack is telling Danny the story of this group of travelers in covered
Yeah.
wagon times that got snowbound,
Donner
and they had to
Park.
resort to cannibalism to
Yes.
stay alive.
Right.
And he's, you know, telling this story with great glee.
It's
So
okay.
right
I
at the
learned
very
it on
start,
TV.
yeah,
Yeah,
right at
learned
the
it on
very start of
TV.
that movie, you've got a reference to
Right.
cannibalism.
Yes. And speaking of, I mean, Kubrick, we talked on your show about how Kubrick uses carnism as an illustration of dominance and violence, you know, and that
Amazing
is,
observation of yours.
thank you kindly. I see that again in Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary, when she's having the pain and she has the black eyes, she cuts a raw steak and she puts it on the pan and flips it once and then takes it off the pan, 9 seconds on the pan. And then she eats this shit. Like, and then there's another moment where she grabs up the raw chicken liver from like in the kitchen while there's cooking. And then she's like eating this raw chicken liver and sees herself in the mirror of the toaster. And she's horrified. Oh, at what she's doing. She's eating this death, you know, like organs, because the evil inside her is craving the evil of carnism. He's using the same archetypal idea that
Motifs,
Kubrick was
yeah.
using. Yeah.
Yeah, great observation. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some other things I wanted to
Well, I'm about done. That's all I had.
oh, right. Okay, well, that's great. I wanted to bring up how the Pope visited on the day that they conceived the baby. And in her dream, the Pope's ring is the tennis root, the charm, you know, that she kisses at like.
Oh, that did just remind me of an anecdote to throw in there. I was listening to Matt Sergio of the Occult Beatles website doing a podcast the other day, and he reminded me of this story from John Lennon's Lost Weekend period in sort of 1973, 74.
When he left his handler and brought another handler along with him. The other
That's
woman.
when he left New York, where he was living in the Dakota with Yoko, and went out to live in LA with May Pang, who was their assistant at the time. And apparently Lennon had Yoko's blessing to go and basically start an affair with May Pang and, you know, live with her. And this is what's known as his Lost Weekend period, where, yeah, like you do, very understanding wife.
Right.
So
the witch.
Reportedly, Lennon was drinking a lot, doing a whole load of drugs, you know, behaving in a very erratic kind of way. But there's this story that when John was called back to New York by Yoko, when she decided it was time for him to return to their marital home, she sent May, if I remember the story correctly, she sent her a locket. And when May opened up the locket, it was full of some foul disgusting smelling compound.
Thank you.
And it puts me in mind of the
Exactly.
tennis route that you get in
Yes.
Rosemary's Baby.
Fantastic.
And apparently May took it to some occult expert, and this occultist said, whoever sent you this really doesn't like you.
Yeah.
And that came directly from Yoko.
Dude, thank you for bringing that up. And that,
Just
again,
remembered that.
is the devil's pepper for Sergeant Pepper, you know, who's the black, you know, the salt is the white and the pepper is the black, you know. And it was, anyway. And another thing about Sergeant Pepper, just one more thing. Vidal Sassoon was on the reworked cover. They like redid a new cover. I forget what year it was, but Vidal Sassoon was added to the cover because he's one of the chosen ones, you know, the knighted ones who belong.
And that's a bloodline family, the Sassoon family, you know, it's one of
Yeah.
these important.
I was looking it up, and it a Jewish Baghdadi family, Jewish family from Baghdad. That's the best I can find about it. I didn't dive too far down that rabbit hole because I was into all these, you know, it's so many in the pot. I just wanted to give a few visual elements that were noteworthy because I just wanted to show that Polanski had a working knowledge of the symbolism of Satanism. In the very beginning, when they're walking into the Dakota, they get into the elevator, and the elevator, you know, is already a charged, you know, element in this. You know, we know from Prince that the elevator will bring you down to the depths, you know. And they're listening to this salesman who's showing them that, you know, and if you look, there's a lamp above on the left, and it's a rose. So, and it's above the guy's head who's showing them the apartment. So they are sub rosa, you know, as they enter this building. And there were other, let's see. Yes, the Tesseract was in 3 places in this film, was highlighted. There's a pillow on her new couch that has squares within squares, a green Tesseract, basically, that she lays her head on as she reads a book. And we know from Passio that the Tesseract represents the cage, the box, you know, the trap, and she's within that trap. There's another moment where there's this door in the apartment where the shape of the door, I can tell you the timestamp, is the shape of the door is a Tesseract. It's like a 3D relief of the square within the outer square, and it's got the trapezoids. It is legit a Tesseract, and he uses that in 2 places. And the moment where she is contemplating her rape by Satan, and she's like quietly thinking in the kitchen or whatever, she's sitting at the table, and it's framed in such a way that she is like small and in the rear, you know, in the foreground, and in the foreground is this door with a door handle, and then huge, takes up half the frame, is the Tesseract. And it's like she is contemplating her, you know, she's in the trap now. She's inseminated by Satan, you know. And then there's another moment where she receives a phone call from Dr. Hill, who's Charles Grodin, and tells her that she's pregnant. And when the phone rings, we get a close-up of the white phone on a black octagon. It's like a little stool that the phone is sitting on. And the black octagon is another reference to the Tesseract, you know, the double square, which is a huge symbol for that. So those are a couple instances like where he's layering this into the film for those with eyes to see. And, you know, it's not for everyone, but he knows that people that are witches are going to be watching this film, and he's giving them little nuggets.
Just makes me wonder, these guys like Polanski and Kubrick, with all the stuff that he layered into his movies, I wonder if they ever expected that people in their lifetimes would come to decode all this stuff. You know, regular members of the public like us.
Yeah.
Polanski's lived to have the satisfaction of seeing people decode all this stuff now. Kubrick didn't, arguably, having died in 1999. But there's quite a few parallels here when you think about it between Rosemary's Baby and The Shining, because you've got the female character in both stories is the victim at the hands of someone they should be able to trust, their husband. But the husband kind of turns against them, as John Cassavetes' character does, and Jack Nicholson's character
in
does.
league with the Satan crowd.
In league with the dark force that they come over to. And so the woman is in peril. And also, it's like the location itself seems to cause the evil to happen. So in The Shining, it's because they're in the hotel, the evil just kind of seeps from every pore of the hotel. And it's the same thing with the Bramford, the Dakota. It all happens within that building.
Exactly.
I just noticed those parallels as we were speaking.
Right. And they give lots of back history into the story of this building. That's all
terrible
witches.
Things that have occurred there before.
Right. Yeah. Cannibalism, pedophilia. You know, they find a dead baby in the basement wrapped in newspaper, you know, and they're like, yeah, we still want to live there. It's like they fell right, they jumped right in the trap. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's sad, but that's really what all of normal Americans, we're all jumping in the trap every day. You know what I mean? On some level, like the Satanists have the control, you know, and we all choose to jump in. Oh yeah, it's not. Yeah, okay, Tom Hanks. Yeah, he's a evil pedophile, but I like that movie. You know, let's go pay some more money to them. You know what I mean? It's like people choose to like engage with this evil. You know,
maybe things will change, brother. Maybe the tide is about to turn.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Who knows?
Right? Yeah.
It's 2021. Anything is possible now.
Yeah, shit. The whole world is upside down.
The rule book is out the window now.
Yeah. And like you say, no more heroes, you know.
That's
it's good to not idolize these stars because they are leading us.
They always let you down.
Yeah, down the wrong path, you know. So yeah, there's, I mean, what else was there? I mean, I don't know. The Minnie, she gives the mouse, and a mouse is a Mickey, you know. A mouse like burrows in and gets into your apartment from like Minnie does, and like Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse.
Minnie, Mickey Mouse, they're signs of the Disney Corporation, which is deeply satanic. That's mind control again, these motifs.
Yeah, and as Rosemary is like under from the drug of the chocolate mousse, she says, I was bitten by a mouse, you know. And then the dead woman says to her, oh, we better tie your legs down in case they have convulsions. And then Rosemary says, oh yes, that's a good idea. Maybe the mouse was rabid, you know. I'm like, oh, it's a good idea, go ahead and tie my legs down. And then there's like two strong men tying her legs down, like, and she's like, okay, just going along with it because of the, you know, scopolamine or whatever else was in that mousse. You know, it was some kind of witch's brew concoction, you know, that gave her that dream and allowed the beast into her. You know, there, I mean, just a fun little thing. At 4 minutes and 20 seconds, they're looking at the apartment, and Rosemary says she did a little gardening on the side too, you know. And then like a couple minutes later, he's like asking her, oh, no marijuana, you know? So it's like they
420, huh?
for 20 minutes. Yeah, 4 minutes, 20 seconds.
Interesting
Exactly.
date.
Yeah. And well, the 420 is related to the cannabis culture, you know. It's
Absolutely.
right.
But in the
And
occult world, it's sacrifice by fire, isn't it?
yes, Hitler's birthday also.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. And yeah, there's a lot of what else? She was conceived, I forget what day. I don't know if I wrote down the day, but Pope John Paul, or no, Pope Paul VI arrived that day. And the fact that she, in her dream, she was on this boat with Jack Kennedy, who tells her, only Catholics allowed on this boat, sorry. Because like Hutch in the dream is like, you know, on the shore as they float away. So she was chosen for her Catholicism, you know, and the Catholics are an evil satanic cult since the beginning, you know. So that reference, I just wanted to bring that one up as well.
Just lost all your Catholic audience there, bro.
Yeah, well, yeah, I had to deal with them growing up. I don't want to deal with them anymore. Yeah, so I mean, just as a general overall, this movie plays on the idea of eugenics. You know, there's the modern woman of the 60s, and they're pushing this feminism, and the women are getting short hair, and they're, you know, striking out without the man, without the baby. They're doing, you know, go out in the world and be somebody, you know, that whole idea. And this, when a woman has a baby, that ties her to this other life of conventional womanhood, you know, and the 60s rejected that. And it's a eugenics operation in a sense, because abortion was, Planned Parenthood was around, or was becoming, I forget when Planned Parenthood started aborting babies, but
Bill Gates is dead.
yeah, yeah, Bill Gates's family, and that, you know, his mom was a member of the United Way, who gives like 20% of all their proceeds to Planned Parenthood. Just it's just part of it, you know, no question
But
about
don't worry, folks. Go out and get your vaccine. You know, Bill just wants to save your life.
it. Right.
He cares.
He's just the evil 007, you know, villain. Just him and Bezos are up on
It's
their
only a
mountain.
little prick, but enough about Bill.
Right. Yeah. That reminds me of a scene when Rosemary is being held down by the coven members of the members of the coven are holding her down, and he holds his Saperstein holds this needle up, and he says, don't worry, it's just a little sedative. And she's screaming, no, you're all witches. And they hold her down and inject her with that needle, you know. And it, you know, you could take that and make it just that image and make a meme out of that for this day and age. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just put Bill Gates in there. It's just a little vaccine.
Yeah, yeah. Just need a little bit of eugenics. You just need to cull the population a little bit, you know. And this idea of like women wanting to maintain their power, and the man patriarchy taking away their power is so scary for these young women that are going to the movie theater, you know, with their modern hairdo from Vidal Sassoon, you know. It's and it relates to Kinsey and that whole, you know, breaking down of the mores of the old conventional motherhood, you know, and they're trying to say that, you know, people have sex with goats and it's cool, you know, you can rape a 12-year-old or 12-month-old baby, you know, every hour for 24 hours. And when he screams, that's an orgasm, you know, okay. Yeah. And that was commonly, that was what they, that was the new normal, as it were, for the 60s, you know. And so that all of that relates to this is like a feminism, pro-feminist it's pro-abortion, anti-motherhood, to scare women into not wanting to have this baby. If they, and the poster didn't tell you much. It was just pray for Rosemary's Baby, right? And then like it's got the baby carriage, and so women, and it's like it's the popular movie that everybody's seeing, and women that are contemplating whether or not they should keep their baby are watching this movie. Some of them in the audience, it's no doubt is, and this plays on their natural fears. And it shows that, in order to maintain your control of your life, you need to kill your baby. I mean, because it's evil. You know what I mean? And to be a mother and accept the evil that is this Satan baby is scary, and it's the scariest thing. And that's the last moment that Mia Farrow does, is she chooses willingly to serve the Antichrist. She's over there rocking him and making him comforted. She's serving the Antichrist through her own free will. That's where it ends. That whole thing, it's all about free will. And the coven wants you to choose evil, because that's what really matters, in the above, in the all, the realness. If you choose with your free will that God gave you to defy nature, then you are setting yourself on the wrong path, the left-hand path, away from the garden, I guess. So yeah, and Saperstein says, don't read books. Don't listen to your friends either. Would you trust a doctor that tells you don't read books? Don't listen
These
to your
days, he would
friends.
say, don't look at the internet, which is something my doctor actually said to me a few years ago.
Are you
Oh,
kidding?
you don't want to believe it, anything you read on the internet.
Wow. Wow. I would be like, see you later, guy, and never go back. Jesus. How can anybody trust that? And I also wanted to talk about how when SRA victims grow up to be an age that they're no longer useful, some of them are chosen to be breeders. And like most women, Dave Chappelle did a stand-up talking about this book, Pimp, written by this guy, Slim Pickens or something, not Slim Pickens, Slim something. And this
Slim Shady.
Yeah, right. Yeah, back to the short hair again. And that whole, anyway, so this book is written by a pimp, and it describes how to own the minds of your slave, right? And Dave Chappelle is giving this as an example of why he left Hollywood and why he gave up on that big deal. And he didn't say specifically what happened, but he described with this book as a like a touchstone to like show. And he describes about how a whore or a prostitute who's a victim of a pimp has only so many fucks. Like she's got a mileage, and when they reach the end of their mental, they can't take it anymore, and they're just gonna either kill themselves or run away. They can't do it anymore. And then like this pimp creates this scenario where it fools the hooker into staying for another 500 fucks or whatever, that keeps him in the money, and this basically is a way of, like, I would like to show that these SRA victims, they reach a point where they are willing to die. They don't care anymore. And when they're breeding, they all of a sudden have something to care about, this baby, and their motherly instinct is harnessed by the occult programmers, and then she's in the game for another 500 fucks, as you know, and she's like, excuse my language, this, you know, this is an explicit show, whatever you can use. I'm using bad language, but she this is like a way of getting more use out of this totally damaged mind that is ready to hang it up. But you know, this is another form of control that they use, and it's displayed in Rosemary as she, at the end, she's horrified. What have you done with his eyes? Ugh. He's not human, right? But she's a mother, and she wants to be mother, you know, and she has that innate in her, and the Satanists use it against her as a trap to keep her in. And now, you know, Satan has a mom. Free will, with free will, she chose to be there, you know, because her instincts is harnessed. Good. Sorry. I saw you raise the microphone. I thought you were going to say something.
No.
So Rosemary is like, she is a trauma-based mind control victim. She's the same as Alice in Eyes Wide Shut. You related to The Shining, and I relate to Eyes Wide Shut, you know, and they control the conception of babies to be used in their cult. You know, the babies are stolen for use, and that's ultimately what Rosemary was thinking was going to happen to her baby the whole time. It was just going to be stolen so that they could do the ritual and drink the blood of the baby, you know, and that was the whole fear. And that is what is happening in Eyes Wide Shut. Like they take the baby to create another monarch sex kitten beta slave, just like Alice was. Helena is the next generation of that. Alice is a breeder who breeds for the cult, who was, you know, who was groomed into it, while Rosemary was captured by the evil of her husband. But, you know, they're playing the same role. They're birthing a moonchild, you know, for the dark occult, you know. And that's what I've been getting at in my other episodes about Eyes Wide Shut, is how this is slavery. Like they own the conception of the children that they raise for slaughter. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything on that. I know we're getting toward, it's been about you know, almost an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, something like that. So I don't know.
I'm done, mate. I've exhausted all my notes and all my
Okay.
observations on it.
Right on. Well, I just wanted to, I guess I wanted to thank you, and I'm honored to have you and, you know, your input on my show. I'm so delighted that you could be a guest, my first guest.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's a hell of a movie to talk about. And it was a hell of a year, 68 as well. That's when Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King were assassinated.
Right.
So lots of things happened that year. Very traumatic for cinema audiences.
Right.
But yeah, a fascinating one to talk about. And I took you away from Kubrick just for a short while.
Yeah, thank you. I'll have to dig back into it again like next week. But you know, I appreciate this, and it's refreshing to get some. I don't want to be the movie guy, you know. I talk about other things, but I really I like that. Like I know that you listen. I hope that you listen to some of my earlier work of these last few shows that I've done here on Wake the Dead.
I heard you're Waking the Dead, yeah.
Good. Thank you. I'm glad that you did. And I want it to be, you know, an expose of all of it, And I think that movies and art is a good way to crack it open. And then once it peels open, anything, you know, can be talked about. And I look forward to where it's going to go. I'm very happy with what is happening so far.
We just spent 2 hours talking without a mention of COVID, Q, or Trump. So that's all good with me.
Yeah, cheers to that. I'm glad of that too. Thank you so much. And I also wanted to mention that we both will be appearing digitally, virtually, for free on the
Is there any other way?
Right. The One Great Work Network. We had last year, we were supposed to have, I mean, so you mentioned COVID, and here we go. COVID put a kibosh on our plans, where we were supposed to meet up in person in Ohio, and we were going to give a speech to Brandon Martin, organize this event, and it was called off. And it's a year later now, and it still can't happen. So sadly, we have to move it online. And thankfully, Mark Passio and the One Great Work Network has offered to host the event on his live streaming, so everybody can tune in on the One Great Work Network.com. I think maybe it's just One Great Work, no, the OneGreatWorkNetwork.com, and it will be playing, just available once you click onto that site. And the dates, let me find the dates. It's May 18th, I believe. Sorry, I wasn't prepared. But the SEED conference, you can find it at skatopia.org/seed. And there you will find the information regarding who will be there. Our friend Nathan Redette will be there. Mark Passio will be there. Brandon Martin will be there. Douglas Martin will be there. So there will be a lot of fun topics to listen, and there will be also a roundtable at the end of the night. For those who choose to participate, we can discuss, you know, whatever we choose. You know, have a little discussion with all of those who decide the speakers of that day. That should be very, very fun, I guess. I don't know. And so it will be available. They will all be recorded and will be surely be played on the continuous 24-hour cycle of work that is displayed on OneGreatWorkNetwork.com. I know you're there. I am there. Brandon Martin, the gentleman who has organized the SEED conference, is also there. We're all content creators. And I just wanted to bring up that we will be there speaking virtually through recorded or live, I believe. And I got the date. I should have the date. I apologize. I'm gonna put it in the show notes, the date and the links for that. So I just want to mention that. And
okay.
Thank you so much, Mark.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, got to run, brother.